Um, Alright, today I'm going to be talking about Harry Potter Book 1, The Philosopher's Stone. I'm just going to be honest with you. I really don't like this one book. So if you want to hear gushing, come back for Book 2, or the last part of this video. Because I'm just going to be honest, there's a reason I was not a pothead or Harry Potter fan for so many years. Because I did, try to get on, board with it when it first started coming out with the first book, first movie, and I just couldn't. And by the time this video is done, it'll probably be a lot more clear why I felt that way. But long story short, there was a reason that it took me more than a decade, to come back and try it again and try to see what was behind this movement, this new thing in literature and movies, because the Philosopher's Stone just left such a bitter, bad taste in my mouth. So let's get into it, and you'll probably notice a different title, ranting about Harry Potter, as opposed to what I'll probably call my video for Chamber of Secrets, which is gushing about wizards. Today's ranting about wizards. So let's just get down to it. Let's start with spoiling the book, just so we all have basically understand what's kind of going on with it. This one is the first book in the series. It starts out before we even know that there are wizards, and basically Harry Potter is a very put upon 10-year-old in a not great house with his Uncle Vernon, his Aunt Petunia, and his cousin Dudley. And then one day Hagrid appears to deliver him to the magical world, where he goes from rags to riches, and he gets to attend Hogwarts, which is the school of magic. And along the way he has hijinks, and then, but unfortunately there is, a not so good wizard, and it's up to Harry Potter to stop him. And that is going to hold true for pretty much the entire book series. So at this point, what can I say? This is a common problem with a lot of early works in a franchise, because you do have to start somewhere, and generally you have to start somewhere pretty basic and then build upon it. So it's not entirely J.K. Rowling's fault, and she does do a lot better job with things later with it. It's just in part 1 it has a lot of not good things that I'll be talking about in part 2 and part 3. But right now I just want to say that if there's someone else like me out there who's only seen the first part, the series does get better. It really does pick up steam, and is not so cartoonishly Mary Sue-ish with their characters, They do pick up gradients and are much more well-rounded. Um, you know, to make an analogy, what the Philosopher's Stone really is like on Star Trek: The Next Generation. If all you saw of the show was episodes like Shades of Grey or The Naked Now, and you thought, oh well, that's Star Trek. Why would I be wanting to watch that? And then not understanding that no, it got a lot better. It started there, and then it grew into something that was actually worth watching, worth investing some time in, worth thinking about. And that was the mistake I made with Harry Potter. I thought it was just this little wizard boy who had everything in the world going for him to a cartoonishly bizarre extent, and then not having to really work to achieve any of his goals. I didn't get any of the pathos or Carthus, with him. But, I mean, but, to J.K. Rowling's defense, this happens a lot with long-running franchises because you don't really know what's, going to be, which is going to catch on, what's going to, be good, and, what you're going to need to keep. I have written down, for example, like Final Fantasy 1. Like, who would have thought that, out of all the things, with Final Fantasy 1, with, set job classes, mute heroes, elemental fiends, that really what was going to catch on out of that game was the turn-based combat. And that's what they were going to build, that's what they were going to build their, franchise on, and, change almost everything else every game. Who would have known that if you just played that game, and who would have known that, at least I personally don't like Final Fantasy 1 that much. 2 is personally a lot better for me, but I know that's just a strange preference. The heroes talk, they actually have, some kind of personality. Granted, it was still a Nintendo era game, original NES, so it wasn't a lot, but it was something. Granted, I didn't play it until they started remaking it, but still, so sometimes, the first to anything, can be difficult. If you watch like the first few episodes of even, not just sci-fi or video games, but even, comedies. If you watch like the very early Nostalgia Critic videos on thatguywithglasses.com, it's a very different show because, Doug Walker didn't know, what the Nostalgia Critic was going to be yet. He didn't know that, himself being a character in the videos would be as much as, his literary analysis of, of the movies. And that was something he had to learn through the process, which, I will give J.K. Rowling this. It's insanely difficult to start, a book franchise. And she managed to do that. Granted, she apparently has gotten a completely free pass for a very, critically deadly sin, writing wise, which, I may honestly do it in a web series based just on, looking through the classics and finding, where classic authors, managed to get away with cheats that I wouldn't be allowed to. A great example is Virgil with the Aeneid. He gets to do something that I wouldn't be able to do in a modern story, which is he can just railroad, his character to do exactly what he wants and just, force him to do it, even though it's out of Adia's character. It's not inherent to any of the problems that he's facing at the time, but yet, because Virgil says so, he has to do these things. And, in a modern play, you couldn't get away. I mean, in a modern, whatever genre you would like to use, or medium you'd like to use, you couldn't get away with that. I mean, that's the main problem people have with Final Fantasy 13, is that it's too railroady, yet Virgil seems to get a pass on that. Or, another great example is Sophocles, with the original Oedipus Rex. He gets away with a just blatant info dump of all the things that are happening there, and at the end of the speech, it's revealed that it's completely exposition. Sophocles already, no, not Sophocles, Oedipus already knew all the things that they just spent, a large, the entire beginning of the play, telling him. And in modern storytelling, you can't do that. So, this may be its own web series as I look back through classic literature and find where ancient people, got to break rules and got away with it. So in that regard, I'm more jealous of J.K. Rowling being able to, do this and get away with it, because she does have pretty flat characters in book one, and Harry Potter is pretty much just a Mary Sue, which I'm going to talk more about in part 2. But if you want someone just praising Harry Potter's goodness, come back for Sorcerer Chamber of Secrets and on, because my personal favorites are Chamber of Secrets, basically book 2, 4, 5, and 7. Those are the ones that make me think of Harry Potter. Those are the ones that bring me into the series. This one, book 1 is just terrible, and I just can barely even sit through it. So okay, this is Harry Potter ranting about wizards part 2, the Mary Sue problem. Which is, well, first of all, what is a Mary Sue? This has kind of become like the buzzword of the internet, right now, because a lot of people are starting to notice, especially with the rise of fan fiction, and this is something you see a lot of with, much more amateur writers, who don't quite, haven't quite fully developed their, skill of how you develop, a character, and have a plot going on with them, because what you need to have happen is that when a character, you do need to give your character strengths, and you do need to give them weaknesses, and then you have to give them a plot that's at the very least challenging to them. You can make them, as strong as you want and as many fields as you want. But if what's going on in your story is not a challenge to them, then why are we bothering to watch or read or whatever medium is being used? The easiest example I can think of is like a video game that's too easy. You just kind of sleepwalk through it and la-di-da. I've beaten this giant Goomba. It would be like if Mario, the only thing that he had to worry about was Goombas. You just simple stomp attack, and that's all. That would not be a very fun game. Whereas if you added, Bowser and other things, then you start building complexity. You start actually having something worthy of trying to attack your hero, and then that, is how you start building challenges. And so, how do you take down a giant lizard, with a spike shell that breathes fire? Well, is there a star that makes you invincible? Okay, that helps. So just using that as kind of like a base example, where most people go wrong is that they either make their hero, too strong so that the challenge isn't enough. I mean, a normal challenge is just, no longer, enough. Or they have the challenge not be challenging, they have the challenge of the plot play directly to their strengths, which, I could certainly see how, I've certainly had that problem, trying to write stories and doing that. And I could certainly see how that happens, because, that's why you're giving them this, these good qualities to begin with, is to be able to do something like that. So I do see how, that could happen, with a character. But to bring this back to, what Mary Sue is specifically, and why it's so bad and such a toxic thing, is because really when you get down to most storytelling, it's so that we can relate to, the protagonist, and kind of use them as a surrogate to, for their challenges and, lifelong learning, and be able to grow, from, their experience, and then be able to adapt it into our lives. So if you have a character that, isn't really challenged, doesn't really grow, doesn't really learn, that's why it's such a, terrible thing in literature. And that's, at least one of the major reasons that I did not like Harry Potter, at all. And then I realized that it was mostly just the Philosopher's Stone that I didn't like. So let me, try to see if I could break it down of why Harry Potter is such a terrible protagonist in book one. I mean, first of all, when he starts off, he literally doesn't do anything for most of the book. It starts off that he's a very put upon, 10-year-old. They make him sleep in a closet, which, I'll get into my headcanon section of, is that really such a bad thing? But anyway, so they make him sleep in a closet, they make him cook them food, Dudley gets all the advantages. And so clearly, early on, what they're trying to what J.K. Rowling felt like she was trying to aim for, was kind of like a almost male Cinderella, kind of archetype, going into it, which, okay, I could buy into that. But then, Harry doesn't really, struggle or, try to take control of the situation at all. He doesn't try to run away. He doesn't, try to get teachers or, any kind of authority figure involved of his, alleged mistreatment. He doesn't even, even do petty things like, try to sabotage, the household. So it's hard for me to relate to that, because he just doesn't do anything. If the situation with the Dursleys is so terrible as they're making it out to be, why doesn't he try to do anything to help his situation? So that's, kind of problem one, and I understand he's 10, he doesn't understand all the, options he may or may not have had. I kind of get that. Okay, I'm not, I'll go with it for right now. And then that's when the letters to Hogwarts start appearing. Okay, so there's now possibly a way out, but Uncle Vernon is stopping it at every turn. Which I'm going to talk more about in part 3 of what this all is. But then basically he gets drugged to the ends of the earth, with Uncle Vernon to avoid this, and then just magically out of nowhere, his, fairy godmother, to take it back to Cinderella, appears as literally his half-giant, defender of good, who, smites all his enemies. He breaks Uncle Vernon's gun, he curses Dudley with a pig's tail, he, breaks down the door, and won't take no for an answer, from any of the authority figures in Harry Potter's life, and will set all the rights that's gone wrong, right there, right now, bam. Okay. But Harry Potter didn't do anything. He didn't even ask, he didn't even have to convince Hagrid to do it. Hagrid just did it because he wanted to. And okay, so now everything is right in Harry Potter's life. His enemies have been defeated, and he's been given a way out of a bad situation. Okay, you know what? It's still the start of the book. All right, let's roll with that. Let's go to the magical world, and then we find out that and you're also rich. Yep, that's right. Your parents left you a ton of money. There you go. Hallelujah. What? Okay, so his enemies are defeated. He's been delivered from the bad situation. And he's rich. Okay. Well, I mean, it's not like everybody loves him or anything. Oh, right, they all love him because his parents were war heroes. Which, okay. He didn't actually do anything. At all. And yet, every wizard loves him. He's now a rock star. Alright, so he has a giant defeat his enemies, delivered from the bad situation he didn't like, rich, and a rock star. Okay. Alright. I kind of see how that might be a little wish fulfillment. It's certainly the start of a character, I guess. He'll probably be humbled. He's probably going to have to be humbled before the end of this book. So, alright, we're at the beginning. And, okay, let's try to keep this going. And so, alright, Hagrid has to go do his own thing. So Harry Potter's alone on the Hogwarts Express. Okay, now let's see if all those other things can add to him. And no, he just makes 2 friends right off the bat just because he's Harry Potter. Just because. He sits next to Ron and Hermione, and now they're friends forever. Just because. Just because. I don't know if I'm just particularly an asshole or if I'm just have a bad soul or something, but if I sit next to 2 people on a train, I don't immediately start a lifelong friendship. I don't. How come Harry Potter gets to do that? How come he gets to just instantly make awesome friends just cause? Okay, alright. I understand it's fiction, and you can't have him sitting alone the whole time. You would need someone to dialogue with. Okay, let's keep going, even though now he has friends he made incredibly easily. All his enemies in his life have been defeated by somebody else, on a whim for him. He's been delivered from all the bad things, he's been delivered physically from all the physical situations of his life. Everyone in the wizard world loves him, and he's rich. Okay, well, at least he's not a sports star. I mean, at least he has that much of a flaw, right? I mean, it's not like he's going to just show up in a sport he's never seen because he's lived with Michaels his whole life, and it's not like he's going to instantly be good at the only sport, right? Right? Fuck. That's right. On top of already 5 really, really cheap ways to try to make your hero sound good, he's also a sports star of a game he's never seen. Really? Really? He's flown literally once in his life, and they want to put him on the team. I could see maybe he's like the backup player. I could see that. I mean, I could honestly see him, trying to be recruited. Maybe, have him, definitely, join the team of some form of, he's the backup seeker, maybe, or something. But he's just, and not only is he magically, one of the best players, in Quidditch, in the school, just cause, he doesn't even have to try out for it, which really puts a bird in my saddle. I mean, I lived in a very small mountain town. We had tiny schools, and we'd have to travel really far to even get to another school to have a competition. And we had tryouts at that age for 6th grade basketball. And Harry Potter doesn't even have to try out. There's literally... Okay, seriously. You want me to believe that year they weren't going to field a team. They were just going to have 6 people and be like, well, we don't have enough people. We forfeit. If Harry Potter didn't show up. Okay, that would have been option 1. Or, which is completely unexplainable and bizarre and strange. Or option 2, why doesn't Harry Potter just do a tryout? Why is there literally nobody else to try to compete with Harry for that very small spot? And just trying out, and even if he just wins automatically, that's such a much better story, because at least he had to overcome something. He did, not Hagrid, not Hermione giving him the answers to the test, not anything else. But no, that's not the Philosopher's Stone. That is, in fact, Harry Potter never has to even try out. Ron does, but not Harry Potter, because he's just too magical. I mean, seriously, the worst trouble he gets into is 1 detention in the entire year. Ooh, 1. And that was for illegally smuggling dragons. A very dangerous creature that's very illegal, and all he gets is a detention out of that. I mean, how is Harry not like the biggest, most ego-ridden son of a bitch ever? My head would explode with, 2 of those things. Well, 1 of those, and I'd be a happy person. 2 of those, and I'd be king of the world. He's got 6 giant things going for him. How is this... I almost feel bad for Draco, who, all he has is the money. I mean, he literally has 5 major things that he doesn't have compared to Harry. I feel more sympathy for him in book 1. I mean, all of a sudden, there's this kid who's never done anything, and everybody loves him, as opposed to Draco, who's lived in the magical world, knows all the people, knows it as being completely upstaged by just some guy cuss. This is not a good book. This is just... How do you like Harry Potter? How do you like this person? And... and this is what's gonna launch 8 movies? This guy? This is gonna be... He's gonna revolutionize the publishing industry? This guy? How? Why? Why does he get everything? I hate him. He's a terrible human being. Fuck Harry Potter. Not only that, but it really stands out a lot more because, and I understand it's it's book 1, so everybody couldn't be developed yet. But like Ron, ironically enough, is a little more rounded in this one because while he's completely stupid, he at least has interest, which is chess. Oddly enough, it's not Quidditch, even though he has visions of wanting the Gryffindor Cup in the mirror, but which is telling and underutilized, in my opinion. Hermione is completely, Hermione, was an okay start. They brought her in there just to pretty much be a device of here's how Harry Potter will get all his smarts, and he has to learn a small lesson about being around socially awkward people. But they didn't really do a very good job of Hermione and getting, at least through to me, why she's so driven, which a little bit of it is just an innate character, but a lot of it is that she felt very insecure because she was a Muggle-born, and so she had to, drive herself so hard because at least this is the headcanon I went with, because she felt so insecure being in this whole new world of the magical world, which at least I didn't get until book 2, which again is just a much better book. Hagrid, I don't know if you realize this, but Hagrid's not that smart. And that's pretty much all we get of Hagrid. He, in the beginning of the book, smites all the enemies of Harry Potter for him, and then is easily tricked throughout the rest of the book, both by Harry Potter, which, is mean to trick your friends, and then, and even by the villain. So, Hagrid comes off as flat. Dumbledore's barely in the book, which let me just question that now. Why is there so little Dumbledore? All we really get is, info. This is another major sin of storytelling, because with Dumbledore, we're really just, for the most part, informed about what he is and what he can do. We barely see it. We barely see that much of the genius. He's... And that's only really book 5 is about the only time we really see Dumbledore in any kind of action. Which, it is in good service, most of the rest of the time. But in book one, it just comes off as glaring because there's so little interaction with him, and yet he's treated like, God sitting on Mount, on high, and it just like, what is this person? What is this character? I just there's so little Dumbledore. It just, I don't even know why they bothered including him, except to at the end kind of ratchet up the danger of he's now not here to protect the thing, which really is all his function in the book. And then he helps explain the mirror in the middle of the book, and then he does the wrap up at the end. That's it. That's all he does. And it was such a terrible launch of this character, because you want to be shown, at least in film school, the motto was show not tell, and all we get of Dumbledore is telling. Granted, in book 7 that's much more justified, but through books 1 through 6, for the most part, we're just told about Dumbledore. We don't get to see him, except for, bits of part 5. We don't ever actually get to see Dumbledore in action, which is really a major flaw in the series, in my opinion, because we don't really get a measure of what a full wizard is and can do, and so what is Harry Potter aspiring towards? What is he working towards? What is the end goal? And we don't get, and at least I certainly don't get that from Philosopher's Stone, and I have a hard time grasping that for the entire series. Because Voldemort seems a lot more powerful, the whole way through. Those are, a lot of the major reasons why I did not like this book. It has a lot of flaws. It has a lot of things you shouldn't do in storytelling. And yet, it became so great. And, I'll admit, a part of it is jealousy. J.K. Rowling got away with a lot of cheats that I wish I could. That I wish I could have people suspend their disbelief this much about just the fundamentals of storytelling. It doesn't even have to relate to the setting or any of the things. Why does Harry Potter get everything all the time? Seriously. And so, that's most of the reasons why I didn't like the book. In fact, that's not even all the reasons I didn't like the book. There's so little Dumbledore, so I don't... Too little Dumbledore, Harry Potter's a Mary Sue. We don't get the everybody seems very flat in the book. There's definitely some logic problems with the first one, which we're going to go into more depth in book 3. There's a lot of weirdness for weirdness sake that I'll get into for part 3. Chocolate frog, no, I'm not going to get started. I just did not like this book, which is a shame because it gets so much better, and it's such a disservice to everybody, to Harry Potter fans, to literature in general. I wish there was like a special edition where J.K. Rowling would go back, now that she's a so much better writer, and just fix and rewrite book 1 and make it feel like the rest of the series. that would be one of my personal dreams. I know she'll never do it, and it's probably smart that she doesn't. But it doesn't even feel like Harry Potter for me starts with Chamber of Secrets. Honestly, this I don't even. I mean, I understand why the publishers didn't want to publish it. It's because I see now why 15 publishers turned it down. It's not a well-written book. She becomes a much better writer later. She's a fantastic writer later. But this one is just bad in so many ways. And I'll get into more of that in part 3. Thank you. Part 3. So last time I was talking about, last time it was just pure negativity and ranting about, why Harry Potter sucks in book 1 as a protagonist, what is wrong with it in a lot of ways. I needed to vent. And don't get me wrong, I am a Harry Potter fan. I really love what it becomes, but this first book is just so hard to take in a lot of ways. One of the parts of the videos that I'm gonna try to be doing in the future is a section of headcanons, changes and questions about each book and what I would kind of do differently, and kind of the things that I had to drill down on and try to think why things were the way they were to make them that way in the Harry Potter universe. With Philosopher's Stone, my changes would be get a new protagonist and get a new plot. So that is a little too much. But in a more realistic way of some of the changes that I would make would be toning down, at the very least tone down, if not completely rewrite a lot of the things she put in there to be weird for weirdness sake, which some of them are kind of necessary because you have to make sure that she's setting up a world, she's setting up that is very different than normal life. So some of the things you do need to change. The fashion, why pointy hats would be fashionable in any universe is beyond me. But hey, if it works for them, it works for them. I could go with that. Why robes? Really, robe? Okay, I kind of get that. It's a very medieval clothes style, and for the most part, which does fit, how the Harry Potter world, kind of works, which is in a very medieval, setting still, which I personally do like and do understand, because if you have a force as powerful as magic that can solve all your problems so quickly and so easily, unlike technology, which requires a lot of work and a lot of thought and a lot of planning, I could see how you would quickly rise to a high plateau, and then because life is good enough and all the magical resources that you would need for that lifestyle are renewable enough that then you would reach a very high plateau and stay there. Whereas technology, we've achieved a very comfortable life right now, but as any environmentalist will tell you, it's not a very renewable foundation that we've built it upon with fossil fuels and everything. So, whether we want to admit it or not, the modern world, not only is it constantly changing, but it has to, because what we've built it upon is, not the stablest of grounds. Whereas whereas at least, and this is just my headcanon, the magical world, was built on, oddly enough, much more stable ground, because what fuels it is not something, is not something like oil, which, it is a fantastic resource, but will run out. Everything in the magical world, is either self-generated or constantly generating, that they can, power it. And so, in that kind of environment, why would it change? I mean, honestly, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Which, I found surprisingly logical, and very good job to J.K. Rowling to kind of think that through and have it make sense. The little bits of technology that we do see is very 19th century. I mean, the Hogwarts Express, they barely have steam engines and photos and photography, which the photography itself, is probably very different in a much older magical thing, because it doesn't work like our photography does. Their cameras work very differently. Their culture, wizard culture, which granted you don't get nearly enough of in book one, but it works very differently, because there's not things like movies that people would go and see. That doesn't exist in the magical world. It's still a book-driven culture. There's there's barely radio, and that's been around since the early the early 19 teens, and took off in the 20s, and and that's and that's a new technology to wizards. So, that's a lot of world building, and granted, that wasn't all in Philosopher's Stone, but the seeds of it were, and so that much I can grant. I'll give credit where credit is due. She started that off great, and I like that technology physically doesn't work with magic. So it's not that the wizards are choosing not to have iPods and iPads and computers. It's that they physically don't function around the magic, which was a very smart thing to do. But if anybody ever continues the series, I would probably I would have someone figure out a way around that, just because, so that it can continue. But that's just my taste. Which, if I'm ever put in charge of a Harry Potter, well, anyway. One of the things that I liked, which wasn't in the book, which would have made too much sense, but the first kind of villain, which is mostly just Voldemort's avatar, which is Quirrell. One of the touches I liked is that J.K. Rowling didn't make him Slytherin, which is the House of Evil. Instead, she made him a Ravenclaw, which I personally like, because it, even in book one, she knew that having every single villain come from, a quarter of the school is a bad idea. Slytherin, I think, needed more development and more rounding in the book series, which I'm kind of sad that it didn't get, even through book 7. But because it's hard to believe that literally they're going to brand a quarter of the students every year as, quote, evil, and then just pass them along. I know Draco doesn't act like a nice guy. Snape doesn't act like a nice guy. Voldemort was a part of that house. But at least, and this is just my headcanon, one of the things that I would do is have every house be the House of Evil at some point. It just depends what era you're in. So, like, if you go back to, like, when Dumbledore was young, Gryffindor would have been kind of like the overlooked house, kind of like Hufflepuff is, and Ravenclaw is evil, and, Slytherin is the House of Good. That would have been, something funny. That's just, would be a fun idea. I kind of wish we could see what the Wizarding World was like when Dumbledore was Harry Potter's age going through Hogwarts. That would be a very, fun, side story or time travel story if they wanted to, have Harry Potter. The answer to some mystery is, from Hogwarts at that time. I would personally, love that, if that ever came to be, because Dumbledore, while he got a lot of development late in the series, he still is just, there's so little about him, and, anyway, I already talked about that. One of the headcanons that I've always, at least one of the things, the series that I always had trouble with, especially in part 1, and part 2, J.K. Rowling does a lot better job with this, which is the Dudley's abuse of Harry, which, in part 1, it's not just that it's, cartoonish, it's not that, how do I explain it? I did a lot of the things that, is considered abuse in, the book. I didn't have to sleep in a closet, but I cooked for my family, and I liked it, and it was something I was good at, whereas here it's, and I understand it's with a different connotation, a very Cinderellian connotation on it of he's being put upon to do it, which is just weird. It just comes off as weird, because if Harry Potter doesn't enjoy cooking, why would you, let him, why would he be in charge of that? I wouldn't imagine most 10-year-olds, unless they have a talent for it, wouldn't be very good cooks. So now you have crappy food, but you spited Harry Potter. Okay. I personally don't get that. Through the books and through the movies, I don't get how big the cupboard, the cupboard under the stairs is. At least in the movies, it looks like an actual room. I mean, granted, not a spacious room, but enough that he has a mattress, that he can, fully stand up. It has a light. It has, I'll fully admit it's not great, but it doesn't seem like the horrible, it doesn't seem like as dungeony as I think the book was trying to portray it. And so I have a harder time getting behind how put upon Harry is because of that. Because, if it's dusty, why doesn't he clean it? In fact, that's also one of the things that he's in charge of, is cleaning. So why doesn't he clean his own room if it's so dusty and terrible? So I had a harder time. The only other one that really stood out to me was Harry Potter getting a bad haircut, which, again, is not, I had bad haircuts growing up. It sucked until your hair grew out, but what I'm trying to get to is that the Dursleys, Dudley is definitely a jerk, there's no question about that. But the Dursleys, at least in book 1, did not seem that terrible. They didn't seem great. But there's a huge gulf between, actually criminally negligent, not good, not good, not good, neutral-ish, and then starting getting into the good. And in book one, they were just not good. I mean, and I can kind of understand where Uncle Vernon, comes from with that. All of a sudden, he has to take care of his nephew-in-law, with, no compensation, no anything. It's just out of the blue. He has a child he has to take care of, pretty much because his wife's sister, said so, because his wife, said so, while trying to raise his own son, which, at the very least complicates, their lives. That's never addressed of, of how they felt. Dumbledore just put it upon them. So Uncle Vernon, I definitely can understand that he never asked for Harry Potter in his life. He doesn't want him there. He very much would like him just gone. But oddly enough, that's not how he acts. And, like I was saying in part 2, where you want to be shown, not told, Uncle Vernon's actions show a lot more caring than I think he's given credit for, because, and I know this is, this may just be me going on a limb, but if he hates Harry Potter so much, why is he willing to go to the ends of the earth and practically beyond for him? I mean, that just seems strange and odd. Unless there was some kind of love or respect or something there. I mean, if he hated, if and just talking about purely Uncle Vernon by himself at this point, if he hated Harry Potter so much, why isn't he just chucking him out the door as soon as the first Hogwarts letter comes and he's like, oh good, now you can be gone. Bam! Out the door. Goodbye! And then not letting him back in, when he comes back at the end of the school year. That would be the most logical thing for him to do, but yet he not only does not do that, he does the opposite of it, which is, trying to keep Harry from the magical world as best he can, which, even if he hates the magical world, it still solves the major problem of his life. So why would he do that? And, which kind of gets to my headcanon of Aunt Petunia in book 1 of, they're doing these things to Harry at kind of this level, at kind of this jerky level, not full-blown abuse level, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to Dementor, act like a Dementor, which we'll meet in book 3 and on, which is if a wizard is depressed and miserable enough, they can't really use their magic, so then, it kind of goes dormant, which, in fact, Aunt Petunia actually says when Hagrid shows up that they thought they could, miserate the magic out of him, which makes a lot more sense. If this is done from a twisted sense of love, everything that they've done up to this point, until Harry is free and clear of the magical world, then things start to make a lot more sense, at least to me, because once that happens, once he's clear of that, then they can treat him, like a person, as opposed to either a potential time bomb or a monster or anything like that, which makes a lot more sense, at least to me, for that Aunt Petunia character, especially after, book 7, which, skipping ahead a little bit, we find out that, her sister, Harry's mom, as soon as she found out about the magical world, it changed her immediately. She started hanging out with very different people who I could kind of see, young Snape not being the greatest guy to hang out with. All of a sudden, because they're this thing, now you have to let people like, Snape around, who had the very, at least the way it's portrayed, a very stereotypical trouble child, aura about him at the beginning. And then she never sees her sister. She doesn't see her sister for, most of a year at a time. Can't be told. All she can get told is snippets of, where she's been, what she's been doing. And so you kind of, at least I got the feeling that what was going on with Petunia and Lily is that there was a very big, deep split between the two. And Petunia, at least Petunia could view it as losing her sister to this force, to this magic, and the magic is has taken her sister away, and changed her, and so then I could feel that Petunia has this loss in her life directly to magic. And while she may have repressed it in herself, she or may not have, personally, I could view it easier in my head that Petunia was as talented as Lily, but she just repressed it even in herself to the point where she couldn't go to Hogwarts. And so I just, my headcanon is that Petunia is acting very much out of love in book one. And that's why they're willing to go to the ends of the earth to save Harry from a force that they view as not only evil, but is going to destroy him. And, they can't say it out loud because, then that breaks what they're trying to do, what they're trying to keep him from. And so that just makes a lot more sense to me than, they're just evil jerks, but at the same time, when given a way out of their problem, they don't take it. They not only don't take it, they go to the ends of the earth just to spite their 10-year-old nephew. And I have a harder time reconciling that version than this is, an unspoken, this is, a twisted form of love, which, and I'm going to talk more about this in, Chamber of Secrets with Dobby, but sometimes people's love is harder to take than hate, which, is something I've run into in my personal life, dealing with some people, which does make it as hard as it sounds to deal with, because if someone hates you, you know how to, just instinctually, how, at least I know how to much more deal with that, of, okay, they're attacking, defend, don't listen, block it out, yada yada, whereas if they're coming at it and they're from a place of goodness, from what you think is, goodness and love, and it comes off badly or it is very venomous to you, but to them it's just normal, then it's a lot harder to just be like, no, because then you shut down the relationship, and it's just, well, I'm going to talk more about that, in book 2. So at the end of part 3, in fact, I haven't even talked about one of the biggest things that I personally hated with it, which, okay, I get that, you know, J.K. Rowling had to try to show that wizards have a different culture. And I got that she needed to find some ways of showing that wizards are both similar to normal humans, but also a way that they're very different. And she used two different candy jokes in Philosopher's Stone, and one worked, and one I personally find horrifying. She went with jelly beans that in the wizarding world have, quote, every flavor, including, you know, dirt and spinach and vomit, which I at least I kind of get. You know, I don't like jelly beans myself, so they all taste like vomit to me. But you know, I kind of get that. Okay, you know, this is idea. You know, this is, you know, kind of how wizard humor, you know, works. It's a little different. You know, we're gonna make a joke candy, and at least in my mind, I would imagine there's some kind of sorting spell, or there's, you know, some way of dealing with, you know, trying to get rid of the horrifying candy, you know, that you're supposed to be using that, you know, they just, you know, don't say, or Harry Potter doesn't learn about. You know, that would make sense. What doesn't make sense is fucking chocolate frogs. I mean, why? No. Okay, I know in real life we have chocolate bunnies for Easter. It's chocolate and it's shaped like an animal, and so you're kind of eating the animal. You know, we have gummy bears. We do have these things in real life. But even if you had the spell, why would you make it come alive? Why would you then have your candy be a living entity that tries to preserve itself? Like the frog, you know, it doesn't want to be eaten, so it'll literally jump out a window to avoid being eaten. And this is supposed to be yummy? This is supposed to be the fun? This is supposed to be the good candy? You know, the every flavor jelly bean is the joke candy. This is supposed to be the real candy? And it just, it comes off to me so horrifying and so bad and wrong, and why? And why? No. Why? Even if you could, there's not even a real world analog. If you could make some kind of edible robotics, you know, and make a robotic Easter bunny, chocolate bunny, that still wouldn't be as horrifying as what they're doing in Harry Potter, because it's, depending on the level of AI, it still wouldn't have things like feelings, and it doesn't automatically, you know, try to self-preserve. It just, it's hard to even describe how bad of an idea chocolate frogs are. Ugh. No. I do not like Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. But, you know, there are some good parts of it, and in part 4, I am gonna, you know, discuss, you know, some of the things that I did like. So, if you're tired of negativity, part 4 is going to be, you know, the things that I did like about Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. So, chocolate frogs are bad. I have to try to headcanon some of the stranger things in this book, but hopefully, but in part 4, I will find something about a Philosopher's Stone to like. So if you do want to hear that, stay tuned. This is going to be part 4. This is going to be the last part of Philosopher's Stone. Which I'm going to try to end this on a high note, even though this is the worst book in the series, and I personally, strongly, viscerally dislike it. There are still good parts. So I want to, talk about that. Some of the things that I, looking back on it, enjoy is that J.K. Rowling did manage and successfully reverse a number of witch and magic cliches and made them good. Such as riding on a broomstick, which for centuries has been seen as a bad thing. She managed to not only make it to a good thing, but then make it to a sport. So that that was very good. She managed to and with that make it a lot more believable of where that stereotype kind of came from, and then that it is that stereotype came from somewhere. It to the people involved, it's a very different thing than what the outsiders would view it as, but it works. And so that I think was a very clever idea. I mentioned this before, but the idea that the universe is that the Wizarding World is at the very least extremely traditional, if not regressive in how it treats new ideas, new technologies, and things like that. I personally found that very believable, very understandable. So that was a very good job that she did with that. But I already kind of talked about that one. A lot of the characters came off as flat in the first one. The only one that it felt like she was trying to give development towards was Harry Potter, and that went terribly because he came off as just such a Mary Sue. But in a strange way, it kind of worked for one of the characters, which was Snape. Because he came off as, so obviously evil, that then it kind of, she did make it work for the mystery. Which I personally, looking back, enjoy. But at the same time, he was never acting out of character of what we later learn about him. He was still Snape, way back then. It just, we've fleshed out the other parts, around it, which is character development really done right. Because Snape's personality is static and really should be static. He shouldn't learn and grow and do a ton of development stuff, through the series, for a reason, which is he's already done that, before we met him. So the only way you can, then get that kind of development is to, look backwards, which isn't the easiest thing to do, and it's usually a bad thing, for the most part, because, you're wallowing in the backstory as opposed to moving the front story, but J.K. Rowling managed to make that work. She managed to, find ways to pull us in and make learning that backstory feel relevant and feel that it's a part of what Harry needs to go through in order to and make it advance the plot. So she does that great in the later ones, and in Philosopher's Stone, really that was one of the few things that I generally did like is how Snape was presented as this static, ambiguously, actually, presented originally as clearly evil, but then managed to, show that no, it was actually ambiguously evil, character, in the series. And then, which, I mean, literally, you can count how many people don't like Harry Potter on one hand in book one, which is a terrible thing for the most part, and that is Draco, Snape, and Voldemort, really, because everybody else just loves Harry Potter. It doesn't really get any comeuppance. It doesn't really cause any problems. I think getting back to the Mary Sue thing, but Snape being one of them, even way back here, was a great idea, and was very well done, well executed. And so I do want to give credit where credit is due. Good job, J.K. Rowling. With that. Something else that the Philosopher's Stone does well, is, oddly enough, it does set up Harry's support system, that he's going to be using for the remainder of the series. Why that's odd is because he is such a Mary Sue, he doesn't need it in book one. He doesn't really need, but, okay, I've gone over that, but, the fact that the Weasleys are there, and they, and he generally likes, three of them, right off the bat. He gets Fred Gorge's respect, he gets, Ron's his best friend, that is, something that is, very important, and, J.K. Rowling does a very good job of, while Ron is, pretty much, immediately his friend automatically, with little reason, friend George seemed much more believable of, he's their teammate, they're seeing him, through the school year, and letting that kind of grow and blossom a little bit, which we don't really, see, what that leads to until book two, but it's good, and it's a lot more subtle, and, so that's extremely well done, in my opinion. That might be a little bit more of a headcanon, but, anyway. And finally, the last thing I really liked about Philosopher's Stone, and this is kind of a bigger topic as well, which is I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't believe in them. I think we actually did land on the moon. I don't think FDR knew specifically that the Japanese were going to attack Pearl Harbor, just to name two examples. I don't think the Rothschilds secretly control all the money in the world. And the reason that I personally, in my own mind, think that is because how would you do that? How would you pull off that kind of thing? You would need so many people, so many, not just hundreds, but in some cases millions of the Rothschild conspiracy of bankers across multiple countries, across multiple cultures, between Germany and Bulgaria and Italy and America and all the other countries that allegedly they control. You have to somehow get all of them to buy into this conspiracy, and none of them are going to say, no, the interest rate's too high, or even if the interest rate's too low, there's too many other strings, we're going to figure out some other way of financing our country, see you later. And then, tell people, or there's not going to be a journalist anytime between the 18th century and now that is going to be able to tell the world that there's a secret family controlling all the money. Or what really I don't understand about conspiracy theories is that you somehow know and have figured this all out, but yet they're not going to stop you. They're not going to hunt you down. You're going to be able to make your internet cartoon about the Rothschilds. You're going to be able to, get your blog going about we didn't land on the moon. You're going to, you certainly seem to have this full freedom of the press in order to tell your version. So why isn't anybody else going to? Why does nobody else seem to? When if they could prove it, that would be this awesome rocket ship to wealth and fame, and you could be, I mean, look at how, look at what happened during the Nixon era with, the reporters who broke Watergate. Bob Woodward still has a standing book deal. It was set for life by breaking that story. And you're going to tell me that nobody can do that? That nobody wants to do that? And nobody's trying to do that? And somehow, and also that there's not... You see, that right there, it's so hard to explain of... That breakdown is so incredibly hard for me to even wrap my head around and try to explain away. But then the next level beyond that, which is that, okay, if there are reporters and they can be proven and they are doing all the things that you're saying that is happening, which apparently doesn't apply to you, but it applies to all these other reporters and are being, I don't know, killed or something else happening to them, yet the proof that they would have dug up to prove it, but then were silenced over, that never comes to light again. That, I mean, there's so many holes of what logically would have to occur in it that I can't wrap my head around how that would work. Just physically, just the mechanics of it. And to bring this back to Harry Potter, why all that matters is because Harry Potter and the Wizarding World is one of the few ones I can believe, because they have the thing that you would need it for it to work. The only two that I've heard, and these are both fictional, and I think there's a reason for that, is the Men in Black and Harry Potter. And that's because what they have, as opposed to anything that is even alleged in real life, or anything even close to real life, is an ability to erase memories of people who do find out about it, because there is no bulletproof way of keeping the information out of everybody's hands, because sometimes people do need to find out about it, and there are accidents, and there are unplanned for things in the world. And honestly, in the real world, the New York Times runs every leak that they can get out of the Pentagon. Geraldo reports troop movements on on CNN. He'll literally draw them. He'll literally have a camera on a live feed and start drawing a map and be like, America's troops are here. They're heading this way. And so, the human condition is so fragile and is so prone to mistake and error that unless you have a way to fix that mistake, which the real world conspiracy theories don't ever really take into account, instead rely on superhuman competence at all levels at all times. The Harry Potter world has a built-in correcting mechanism, so I believe much stronger in Harry Potter's world actually maintaining its secrecy than a lot of other things, which is because they have the ability to not only erase memories and put in substitute memories, but physically, they have a magical version of like the cloaking devices from Star Trek. Okay, those three things right there could cover most of it, and then on top of that, the wizards are powerful enough and rich enough that they can then whatever tiny amount is left over, they can, keep out, the BBC, or the London Times, or whatever the newspaper is. And so I can get behind that. I can believe that because I can see how mechanically that would actually work, and that actually comes off as functional, to me. At least in the pre-internet era. Honestly, if they were going to do any more Harry Potter movies in a post-YouTube, post-Twitter world, honestly, I don't think that the Wizards would be able to keep up because they don't even know what computers are. It doesn't work in their world. Which I think would be an awesome Harry Potter movie of somebody trying to expose the magical world, and their big scheme is just take a magical item and go running around the world with it, and get it in front of as many like tourists and people with just cell phone cameras as you can, and just flood the internet with the proof of magic being real, and the Wizards wouldn't have any way to deal with it. So that so I think that would be a very good story if they were ever to do any more Harry Potters. But the fact that I certainly come with a bias about this, about I'm very very not towards conspiracy theories. I'm very against the idea of it, just because it doesn't make sense on the face of it, to me at all, that J.K. Rowling can get me to believe in that. That is a very powerful thing, and I do have to commend her for that. I come into it with as strong of a bias against it as I can, and she still manages to get me to believe. So, good job J.K. Rowling, good job Harry Potter. If nothing else I took from the book, which is very little, it was that. It's that she built this world, and managed to make it self-consistent enough, even though it's so strange and so different than what, at least especially me, is used to, especially as an American, as opposed to, it's a very British book series, which it's entitled to be. I think America is mentioned once in Goblet of Fire. Which, I have a headcanon that in the magical world, the Imperial British Empire is still at the full height of its, power, but, that's an aside. Out of the Philosopher's Stone, she did get me to believe that something I wouldn't normally believe. She got me to suspend my disbelief in a very poignant way that normally I'm very much on guard against. And looking back on it, in a very strange and very shallow way, I was touched by that, and do applaud her and commend her for that effort. And is Philosopher's Stone as good as the rest of them? No. As I talked about in part one, a lot of things have a problem with, getting things started. How do you get a ball rolling? How do you make a world as complex as Harry Potter? How do you get into that? And at a certain point, you just have to take a stab. You have to take a whack. You just have to grab your axe and take a swing. And that's what she does in this book. And while it's not as great as, and while it's not as what I would have wanted or hoped or anything, for it to be, and she does make it better later, it had to start somewhere. It had to be there had to be a first of something, and well, I'm jealous that she got to have such a blatant Mary Sue. I understand why. I don't like it, but I do understand why, and I'm just grateful that it was allowed to continue, and that J.K. Rowling was able to, um, once she got enough experience under her belt, to really improve things. How much phenomenally better A Chamber of Secrets is. I mean, for me, is just astounding that she could improve that much between book 1 and book 2 without, other other works that she was working on, as practice to try to level grind and get to level 3 +4 writing ability or anything like that. I mean, there are some things that are still missing out of the Harry Potter world. As far as I can tell, there's not a military, but then again, I don't know how wizard countries, function. She doesn't really, mention that, which, from her perspective, I guess makes sense, because how much would a teenage boy care about foreign policy? Which does make sense. I mean, we don't even get other school, the idea that there are even other magical countries out there till book 4, and that's put on there very lightly. So I mean I don't like Philosopher's Stone. I'm sorry, but it does have some good things, and it did get the ball rolling. And if nothing else, getting that ball rolling is about the hardest job in the world. And I couldn't, I mean, I wish I could get a book series going as popular as Harry Potter. But at the same time, I also understand why, why they didn't want to publish it immediately. It has these glaring flaws that I don't know if any of the notes, any of the letters, any of the rejection letters from the publishers, if J.K. Rowling's ever made this public, or even what the type of letter would say, but I would imagine it would have something similar to those criticisms in it, because it is just so writing basics of literature, of you don't give your hero every advantage and then don't put them in a situation until the final chase scene, which is also something I like, is the final, how do I even call this, they're running a gauntlet of things, of traps that the teachers have set up in order to protect the plot MacGuffin, which it makes sense of why they did it this way. It plays to their individual strengths, but at the same time, this, it came off to me as it was never intended to be the permanent hiding spot for the item, the Philosopher's Stone. So they did not put their all into it, and so while it does reflect all their personalities and all their strengths, it doesn't, take them all up to 11. It doesn't have McGonagall's greatest transfiguration. It doesn't have Snape's greatest potion. It doesn't have, Hagrid's, craziest beast. But it has enough of those that it would be able to stop most people. and more importantly, it would be able to stop probably any individual for the most part, regardless of skill level, which is important because, Dumbledore would probably be a bad example, but, Nicholas Flamel or somebody else, may need to get to the stone, so they couldn't make it as difficult of traps as, really they probably could have, because this was supposed to be temporary, and at the same time still be able to access it. So, I at least, to me, it came off as kind of a good middle. But that's me. Some of the skills they set up in this book never come back. Most notably, Ron's chess ability just kind of vanishes forever, which is not good. But for part one, for what it had to do and to be, it is what it is. And honestly, if I were a book publisher, I probably wouldn't have published it, and regretted it, because with book two, which the videos are probably going to be gushing about Harry Potter. It's probably going to be what those are going to be called. If this is since this is all I saw of Harry Potter, I did not think highly of the series, and it took me a dozen years in order to get the bad taste out of my mouth and try it again. And I'm glad I did, because it becomes a much better series, and that starts with Chamber of Secrets, which will be the next video. So thank you for listening to ranting about Philosopher's Stone, and next time I'll be gushing about Chamber of Secrets. Thank you.